Who would win? An ancient god so powerful and impossible to defeat that he had to be locked away by other gods, or one glowy girl? Today we're discussing the most hated story mode in Mortal Kombat history, which is heartbreaking for me because I actually like this story. To me it has some really great character interactions and some satisfying story arcs. For example, Sonya finally gets her chance to kill Kano and satisfy her revenge, but doing so would leave her team without answers and jeopardize her mission, and so she relents, proving that her responsibility is stronger than her hatred. But then on the flip side we have Scorpion, who puts revenge above everything else, which ends up releasing the most dangerous villain so far and possibly dooming all of NetherRealm. Scorpion could not let go of his revenge, and so he paid the price for it. Watching Quan Chi die was still awesome though, so satisfying. But yeah, let's discuss the most hated moments from Mortal Kombat X. Today's video is sponsored by Royal CD Keys. Find yourself some amazing games and cheap software like Windows 11 Pro for $3.07. Use my link in the description below for a special discount. Right away when the story starts off, we learn that the Revenants are jobbers. It doesn't matter that Johnny Cage is fighting Sub-Zero, who we can rest assured would probably beat him in a 1v1. Doesn't matter because Sub-Zero's a Revenant, he's going to lose here. Johnny Cage is about to fight Scorpion and Sub-Zero at the same time, which should not be possible, so we know once again that Revenants are just weaker than everybody else. Although, oddly enough, Scorpion's not a Revenant here. He is a Wraith, I believe, or something different. He's not a Revenant, so Scorpion should be soloing Johnny Cage right now. There can be no doubt. However, once again, the Revenants are simply weaker, and I think that's because the writers wanted to give you more characters to fight than just the same villains over and over again. You can only beat Baraka, Reptile, and Shiva so many times before you get bored, and as a result, they gave you some good guys to fight as well in their evil form. However, at the same time, the writers want the story to keep going, so they can't have the heroes lose to these new villains, even if it does make sense logically, because this is their souls and it is their bodies, so I don't see why Sub-Zero's any weaker here. Which means the only reason Johnny Cage is winning is because the writers want his chapter to keep going. So once again, I do understand why the Revenants suck in story mode, but it's a big letdown because the idea of Liu Kang being the villain is super scary and very interesting. Because just imagine trying to fight the champion of Mortal Kombat when he wants to kill you and has murderous intent, something he's never had in the previous game. It's a really fun concept, but as we'll learn later, Liu Kang is not nearly as strong in his Revenant form, just like every other Revenant is weaker than their living counterpart. And then for a minor nitpick, some of the Revenants are just missing from this game, which is odd because they don't have to be playable. You can just use their character models and reserve them for cutscenes. Characters like Jade, for example, are gone for no reason. And then next we have what is possibly the biggest complaint for most players about story mode, and it's the fact that Shinnok, despite being the main villain, is barely in the story mode at all. He shows up in chapter 1, and then he's around for a couple of chapters at the end, and that's it. And sadly, this trend continues in Mortal Kombat 11, because we thought it was going to be all about Evil Raiden, but then nope, Evil Raiden's gone by chapter 1 or chapter 2, and then instead we have Kronika. For whatever reason, NetherRealm writers love to do that bait and switch. However, I think in this game, the motivation was different. I think the writers just wanted to have the time skip, because that way they could introduce the Combat Kids, Takeda, Kung Jin, Cassie Cage, and Jackie Briggs. Some players don't like them, but I'm actually a fan of the Combat Kids, and I think the writers wanted to introduce them naturally, and so they needed the time skip. However, in saying that, there was a way to have both. You can keep Shinnok alive the entire game and also introduce the Combat Kids. Just have Mortal Kombat X start after the time skip instead. That way the Combat Kids are all grown up, and then the threat of Shinnok finally starts. Maybe it took him 20 years to get his plans in order, who knows? But at least that way you don't have to force the time skip after chapter 1. Just start off with the game already in the future and a big gap between MK9 and MKX. If the writers had taken that route, they could keep Shinnok in the story mode the entire time while also having all these new characters to show the player. And then we have the defeat of Shinnok himself. I think this upset a ton of players right away with Mortal Kombat X's story mode, because Johnny Cage's power level is nowhere near Shinnok's. However, keep in mind that all Johnny Cage really does is stall Shinnok here, and then Raiden actually gets the W by sealing away Shinnok. And maybe that's why I didn't take a huge issue with this fight scene, because I didn't know if Johnny Cage really won or not, but at the very least he did hold off Shinnok and keep him at bay. We already know that Shinnok's not killable, so chances are if the fight went on, Johnny Cage would have lost. And now on to chapter 2, because here's a good time to bring up how many non-playable characters are fightable in story mode. Characters like Rain and Tanya, who would later be playable, but in story mode her moves are completely different. These characters can be fought, but you never actually get to play as them, and that left a lot of players really upset and salty, especially because they were never DLC. And I can understand that sentiment. I do think it was kind of weird to tease the player like that, but once again, I think the writers just wanted to give you more people to fight, so what they did was actually copy and paste these characters from Mortal Kombat 9. So despite what some players would have you believe, these characters are not fully in the game and ready to play. They're really not. You can mod the game and then mess around with them, but you'll find out pretty quickly how lacking they are as a character. They don't have 3 variations like everybody else, they don't have intro dialogues, no fatalities, brutalities, all that stuff. They're as bare bones as possible. However, even so, it may have been a good move on the developer's part to have a special mode where you could play as these characters. Oh boy, and then we have Kotal Kahn losing to Kung Jin. Once again, a big moment in the story that most players hate. And you might not realize why unless you read the comics, but in the comics, Kotal Kahn does some really cool stuff. He takes out Rain, he literally de-arms Goro, all that cool stuff. Kills Goro's dad too. So in the comics, he's really strong, but you wouldn't know that from story mode. In the story mode, it seems like he's just a poser who is stronger than everybody else, but nowhere near Shao Kahn's level or Goro's level, nothing like that, but still stronger than the average fighter, which is why Kung Jin can show up with his Shaolin training and still best him, because we all know the Shaolin monks have some really strong fighters, right? Kung Lao, Liu Kang, and now Kung Jin. It's not that hard to believe that he could defeat Kotal Kahn given what the story mode shows you, but when you read the comics, you're like, man, Kung Jin is either god tier and just doesn't know it, or the writers forgot how cool Kotal Kahn is supposed to be. However, once again, to most players, it just seems like Kotal Kahn either sucks or it's a really bad case of plot armor where Kung Jin gets to win because you're playing as him, and that's the only reason why. And I'm not sure where to include this next complaint, but I think a lot of players were disappointed how certain characters never got a chapter in story mode, especially fan favorites like Quan Chi, or even certain villains like Reptile and Aaron Black. All of these characters mentioned are beloved, and players would have loved the chance to play as them in story mode, but just never got the chance. Quan Chi especially. Not being allowed to play as him in story mode is a huge sin, because I think a lot of us knew he would not come back for Mortal Kombat 11, and we really wanted our chance to play as him in this story mode. And next we have one more hated scene, which is where Quan Chi gets downright disrespected really hard, and it happens constantly in the story mode actually. Quan Chi is a joke and just constantly beaten and wrecked in story mode, and I'm in the minority here because I love that. I've never actually liked Quan Chi. Ever since he killed Liu Kang by shooting him in the back, I've hated Quan Chi and thought he was a bit of a coward. I was waiting for the moment he overstepped or made a mistake, and it all came crashing down on him. And this story mode is pretty much just that over and over again. Quan Chi failing repeatedly and just getting the business in his cheeks handed to him over and over again. However, I do understand that a lot of players actually love Quan Chi, and he's one of the preferred villains in the franchise, so I understand why watching him lose over and over again is very unsatisfying, and people hated it in this story mode. Oh boy, but then we have this scene, which hurts me painfully because I love Mileena, especially in this game. She was so much fun to play. I think Mortal Kombat X, despite killing Mileena, did a lot for her character. She's way more prevalent in the story mode, her personality is more fleshed out, and her attacks and playstyle are the best they've ever been. She's super fun. But then we have the fall, her dying to D'Vorah, which sucks in this game, but as we'll later find out, D'Vorah just loves to kill main characters, and for some reason, the writers keep letting her kill main characters. She's apparently one of the strongest new characters that NetherRealm's ever made. But then we have the Kiss of Death, and I think it's the way that Mileena dies that most fans take issue with, not just her death itself. Going into Kiss Mileena is one of the most dangerous mistakes you could possibly make given her crazy big teeth on her jaw. She could easily chomp your face off, and as a result, you'd think that she would just take a bite out of D'Vorah and kill her right then and there. And then on top of that, why can't Mileena teleport? Is she in some sort of magical restraints that take away her abilities, or does she need the size to teleport? I've always kind of wondered that. Can Mileena teleport, or does she need the weapons for it? And don't get me wrong, it's a very gruesome death that is certainly worthy of Mortal Kombat, but I think more players wish that she had died in some blaze of glory, because once again, she's a big fan favorite character. And now that we're in Takeda's story, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of characters are made much weaker in Mortal Kombat X. A great example being Ermac. This guy should be crazy strong, and there's no way that 90% of the cast can beat him in a 1v1 fight. So once again, it's a case of plot armor. Whoever you're playing just gets to win fights. But then again, at least in Mortal Kombat X, there's a bit of a reason why. I do believe somewhere in the game it explains that Ermac is actually falling apart because Shang Tsung is dead, and Shang Tsung was the one responsible for keeping Ermac healthy, since he is pretty much a collection of souls, and Shang Tsung knows soul magic, so he would actually keep Ermac healthy. But now that Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn are both dead, there's nobody with soul soul magic who can actually keep Ermac healthy, at least not in Outworld. So that could actually explain why Ermac is weaker in Mortal Kombat X, as opposed to MK9, where him losing to Stryker makes no sense whatsoever. And now it's on to Jax's chapter, because it is time for the infamous hand stomping scene. So Sindel's going to grind her heel into Jax's hand, and as you can see, he is in severe pain despite it being a robotic arm. And to a lot of viewers watching, this seemed like a mistake. In fact, even Gaming Sin said this was a mistake on the writer's part, but I genuinely think the writers want you to believe that Jax has artificial nerves in his arms, which when you think about it isn't that hard to understand. I mean, how else could his brain move them around if there's not nerves in them? I understand it's a video game and therefore it doesn't have to be 100% logical, but when your arm's asleep and you don't have sensation, you can't move the arm until the feeling comes back. So you do need to have sensation in your arms to actually move them. Or at least you would if your arms were as complicated and efficient as Jax's arms are. I understand there are prosthetics out there that don't have sensation in them and can still move, but think about how much better Jax's arms are than those arms. The reality is, if you want your arms to be as fast as possible, then they have to respond to your brain as effectively as possible, and that's not going to happen unless you have fake nerves or some sort of sensation in the arms, because that's how your brain communicates with your limbs. And even if you still don't believe me after all that explanation, keep in mind that during fatalities, when you chop off Jax's arms or hands, he does scream in agony, so that's more proof that he does have some sort of nerves in his arms. Ah yes, but then we have Jax versus Liu Kang, one of my least favorite scenes in story mode, because I still didn't want to believe that Revenants were just jobbers in story mode. I wanted evil Liu Kang to be a threat. Look how cool he looks in this game, and I love the idea of his motivation being sinister and him being bloodthirsty and not holding back and willing to kill. That's so exciting to me, but then nope, he can be beaten by most people, including Jax. And I don't think Jax is weak. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think Jax would ever be a match for Liu Kang in a fair 1v1. However, the story mode is about to prove me wrong and also show that Revenants just suck. They're not the threat they really should be. And this next part is a minor nitpick, but it still bothers me quite a lot. So Takeda has acid in his eyes from Reptile, so the writers are playing with the idea of him becoming Kenshi, everything down to the blindness. But look at this, it's solved with water. Now, I don't know if any science majors are watching, but I'm pretty sure that acid is not defeated by water. If anything, I bet it just spreads it around and makes it worse. So yeah, this scene doesn't make any sense to me, but as a writer myself, I understand why this scene exists. They wanted an intimate moment between Takeda and Jackie, because the whole time Takeda's been hitting on Jackie and she's been playing hard to get or just being a bit aloof in general. However, in this scene, she returns his feelings by making sure he doesn't go blind. She might not love him, but she does care about him, and that means a lot for Takeda, and they have a better chemistry now for the rest of the game. So once again, I understand why this scene exists. I just wish they found a better way to get rid of the acid than just pouring water on it, because I'm pretty sure that wouldn't work, especially not for Reptile's acid. Oh boy, and I've saved the best for last because the story mode did too. This is possibly the most hated scene in the entire game, and it's Shinnok being defeated by Cassie, and not just regular Shinnok, but corrupted Shinnok, who is much stronger. And that's kind of crazy to think about, because an Elder God is already extremely strong, and now Shinnok is that on steroids. So theoretically, nobody should be able to even hurt this guy, let alone defeat him in combat, but Cassie Cage does just that, and it's because she has the green glow just like Johnny Cage. However, I think this green glow is greatly misunderstood. Some people think it's simply a power increase, kind of like going Super Saiyan. So Cassie Cage gets stronger, and that's why she can defeat Shinnok. However, I don't think that's the case. Instead, I think the green glow is more like Kryptonite versus Superman. Kryptonite does not beat Superman because it's crazy strong. It just happens to be his personal weakness, and as a result, a homeless person could walk up to Superman with Kryptonite and kill him theoretically, because once again, Kryptonite is Superman's one weakness, and I think it's the same case for the glow, and it just happens to be green by coincidence. And there is a bit of a throwaway line in story mode where Johnny Cage explains that Raiden told him his people were created for the gods, and some people think this means the gods made them. I think it means they were bred to defeat gods, and that green energy is actually the anti-god energy. That's just my theory, but the game does kind of reinforce that by showing him defeat a god, and then Cassie Cage also defeat a god with the same glow. And in fact, Mortal Kombat 11 even confirms this in one of Cassie Cage's intros. Jackie says something like, oh, use your green glow on Shao Kahn, to which Cassie replies, I can't, it only works on gods. So there you have it. Cassie's green glow is really effective on gods. Now I do think it powers her up a little bit, and that's why her and Johnny Cage glow during certain attacks. I do think it's a bit of a power increase, but that's not why she beat Shinnok. It's because he's actually just weak to this stuff. Once again, it's his kryptonite. And I am not saying that's great writing by any means, but at the very least, it was foreshadowed in Chapter 1 when Johnny Cage defeated Shinnok with the exact same energy. The green glow, for whatever reason, is the weakness of gods. Alright, and there you have it, everyone. The most hated moments in Mortal Kombat X, which to many is the worst story mode in the NetherRealm games. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Which story mode do you hate the most, or did I miss any moments that you hate even more? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It really does help my channel out a ton. And then keep that combo going by subscribing and ringing that bell. That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.